everyone, and welcome to episode number 8 of Average Ontario Anglers, the podcast. So it's been a fun ride so far, 2 months in now, and I've been loving it.
It's been fun.
For sure. So today's episode is an exciting one.
Yeah.
It is all about fishing myths and creatures, specifically a couple local to Ontario cryptids.
Okay.
So,
and what does cryptid mean?
So an example of a cryptid would be like Bigfoot. So it hasn't been proven to exist, but there have been sightings of a creature.
Interesting.
So yeah. So that's going to be, and a lot of fishing myths, something you might have heard growing up, different things. It's like, oh, don't talk on the boat. That's one of them. So little spoiler alert there. So we also have our awesome sponsor this week for a giveaway. It's, I believe, our biggest giveaway to date so far for the podcast. Jesse's wearing their hat right now, so that's a good one. We got a couple lures in the wall behind us. So Len Thompson is sponsoring this giveaway, and it's $100 value of spoons that you get to win. So we have some great entries. We're going to be revealing the winner of that at the end of the episode today. In the meantime, Jesse has prepared for us an interesting fishing fact, and I phoned mine in last week, and I see Jesse has a piece of paper, double-sided, single-spaced, so I assume it's going to be a good fact, and he obviously didn't phone this in.
Did my research.
Good.
So I thought it would be obviously good to do an interesting fishing fact about Len Thompson.
Ooh.
Because of the awesome giveaway. So Len Thompson lures. Now, my question to you, Andrew, is, and you obviously know this, why is a spoon called a spoon?
Because you can cut the handle off a spoon, drill a couple holes, and now you have a spoon.
Exactly. So around, and they don't know exactly, but around 1820-ish, which is over 200 years ago, some guy took a spoon from, his kitchen cabinet, took a spoon.
His wife must have loved that.
Yeah. Cut the handle off, drilled 2 holes, added split rings, and added a hook, and he started to use it and began to catch tons of fish. So this is like, at the time, this was like a new thing. It's like, whoa, a spoon. Like, it seems so basic to us now, but like back then that was like insane. Started catching tons of fish. You have to think. Something that was efficient to use. It wasn't live bait, and fish would slam it, and it was cheap to make. This guy was like, man. So what happened instantly? This style of lure, it was new, it was exciting. All the companies at that time, which many of them still are around, a lot of them have gone out of business, obviously. So they started making their own versions of it. So it was a very popular design. So now, as we know, not everything brought to the market is perfect or like as well designed as it could be. And it was the same back then. So obviously some of the spoons were probably okay, but they weren't like perfect. They didn't wobble perfectly. So along comes this guy, this cool cat named Len Thompson. Okay. Now he returns from World War I. Len Thompson, he tried many lures. He was an avid fisherman, and he knew, because he was smart, that he could improve on the designs of the spoon. So you have to think, like, what can you change on a spoon? It's just a piece of metal. Well, he knew that the perfect wobbling action of a spoon to make it enticing to fish had to do with the right combination of shape and weight. So like the thickness of the metal, the bend, how it's designed, even little minute differences in the shape of the spoon can make a huge difference on how it wobbles. It's like, I'm sure you've used spoons over the years that they're not the best, and they kind of spin. They don't have a really perfect wobble to them.
Yeah.
And they don't catch as many fish. That's a fact. So this is funny. So imagine just a second, you're out on the lake and it's quiet and you're fishing with live bait or something, and all you hear is ding, ding, ding. And then ding, ding, ding. And then zzz, blop. And then fish on. Okay. That is the scene of Len Thompson, because to perfect his spoons, he'd oftentimes bring a ball peen hammer and a file in his boat so he could modify his lures as he was using them. So imagine that he's modifying ding, ding, ding out on the boat and out on the lake.
I need to include an anvil on my boat build.
Yeah, we have to add an anvil. And he did this obviously for a while, and he tried to perfect his prototypes and make them even better. So he didn't just have one product that came out and he was like, that's good enough. He was literally like, no, this has to be perfect. And he tinkered with it until he got the right shape. So eventually, Len Thompson decided to make lure making his full-time gig. He's like, you know what, I can do this. We can, ramp up production. Long story short, there's a big story, obviously, of like how he had to find suppliers for all the metal, the hooks, all the components and paint and all that stuff. And within a few months, he had a factory running in Saskatchewan. So full out factory. Then years later, in 1958, they joined with the Pallister family and became the Thompson Pallister Bait Company. And they moved to Alberta, which they're still in Alberta now. Also in 2016, they acquired Northern King Lures, which I know, they're like really popular salmon trolling spoons. So they acquired that company as well. And the interesting fact is, since 1929, this company has sold approximately 55 million lures. 55 million. That's insane.
Awesome.
That's imagine 55 million lures.
Yeah, that's a Canadian company selling to every single person in Canada 1.5 times, pretty much.
It's crazy. And every year they still manufacture 500,000 lures annually, this company. So that's amazing. And this is like a multi-generational family that's continuing to make these here in Canada. Now, Len Thompson, what would you guess is their best-selling spoon?
5 of diamonds.
It has to be. And the 5 of diamond spoon is their best-selling spoon, and for good reason. It's a fish catcher. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But if you're ever in Calgary, this is another interesting fact. The world's biggest fishing lure, and this is like Guinness World Records certified, is Len Thompson built it, or they had it built, and it's a big 5 of diamond spoon, and it is huge. So it's the actual spoon body is 27.5 feet long. It's 9.5 feet wide, and the treble hook is 14 by 8 feet wide.
I've seen pictures of people standing beside this thing.
It's huge.
I would love to go
and
there.
it's actually located at the Len Thompson trout pond. That would be really cool to visit.
That'd be cool, yeah.
So like, we've been using Len Thompson spoons for a while. One of the first, we were actually just talking about this the other day. One of the first Len Thompson spoons that I ever bought was, I forget what size. The size just below, I think it's a 00 maybe. But it was that frog color you were talking about. It's like a green color with the black blotches on it.
Yeah.
Because like my dad would use frogs growing up for bass, and I always thought like, oh, so I bought this frog spoon. And over the years, we've used quite a bit of Len Thompson spoons, and especially what we like them for too is pike fishing.
Yeah.
But really like them for salmon fishing in the fall, the glow. And to add one more interesting fishing fact, the new Len Thompson Super Glow spoons are coming out for 2023. It's a new product this year. The same awesome shape as a regular Len Thompson with that really enticing wobble with really, really upgraded paint. Now, a few years ago, I think 2 or 3 years ago, I put an order into Len Thompson and I ordered a whole bunch of glow spoons and we caught a ton of fish on them. These ones, the glow is way better.
Yeah.
It's way better. Yeah. It's a huge upgrade. And the color patterns they have, amazing. So definitely check those out. 100% going to be a killer this fall for salmon in the fall. But that's my interesting fishing fact. What's my rating, Andrew? Every week we get a rating.
I give you letter ratings, I think. I'm going to give you a letter rating today.
Okay.
So I'd say that was a B+.
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 Come on, that was an A- at least.
Now the reason why it's a B+ is because I bumped it up from a C. Only because Len Thompson is awesome. No, that's kidding. No, that's good. I definitely liked hearing him, how he made them. To have him actually tinkering with it on the water is hilarious.
That's so funny.
Imagine like they're not just like testing it in like a tank. He's like, no, I'm fishing this whole time while I'm doing it. Yeah. That's a diehard angler right there. Like, I'm not taking time off out of my fishing schedule to make lures.
So next time you're looking for a killer pike spoon or salmon or trout or whatever you're fishing for, buy one that's made right here in Canada, and you will 100% be happy with it.
Awesome. Okay, so thank you for the fact. An interesting fishing fact. So we're going to jump into our main topic today. Again, fishing myths and cryptids. So
I feel like right now I should be like, ooh.
Well, that's your job for the next 5 minutes. Just this light background
Here I go.
oohing.
I can't keep it up. If you're listening to this and you think I'm a weirdo, you are right.
That's correct. All right. So have you ever heard this myth? Fish bite better in the rain.
Of course.
Is it true? What do you think? We'll do this for some of them. Do you think that's true?
I don't know. Scientifically, I feel like I've had some really good days fishing in the rain, so I feel like it is true. But I don't know if science actually,
So the science
that.
behind it is because they've done tests since then. Like rain is a good indicator of the weather pattern changes that can elicit more fish to bite.
Is it like the barometric pressure?
So barometric pressure.
Okay.
So yeah. So weather patterns, they bring a change of behavior with the fish. The bigger the change, like the bigger the weather is, the more change it will generally have to its surroundings. So when you have things like in the rain, for example, it'll stir up the water more so because it's running. Rivers and stuff are bringing out some more dirt and debris, so it's going to bring down water clarity. Brings barometric pressure, I believe, down during storms. Rain can also be the cause of either warm weather coming in or cold weather coming in. So rain could be, it changes depending on if weather is the fish are biting better before the rain or after the rain.
Okay.
So there are times when they say, oh, fish before the storm, that's great. If there's a cold front coming in, that's true because fish are going to be feeding before the rain comes and this cold front hits and they're going to slow down. But if you're getting a tropical storm coming in, oftentimes they have better fishing after the storm. So fishing in the rain is better in the rain, not necessarily, but rain is an indicator that there's other changes happening with the weather patterns that can affect fish.
I like fishing in the rain too because a lot of people, like if say you're fishing a pressured lake and there's like jet skis going around, pontoon boats, as soon as it starts raining, they all leave the lake and I have the lake to myself.
Yeah.
So
it is worth it to stay out in the rain, I'd say, as long as it's not like lightning.
yeah, that's happened to us a few times, but sketchy.
Yeah. Get some good rain gear and it's awesome to stay out.
Yeah.
Next one. Have you ever heard this one? I hadn't heard this one before. So there's an old expression: wind from the east, fish bite the least. Wind from the west,
Fish bite best.
fish bite by the best.
I've heard that.
Wind from the north, few sailors set forth. Wind from the south, blows bait in their mouth.
Yeah.
So I hadn't heard that before, at least not the full.
I've only heard the
rhyme.
first part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you think there's a truth to that?
I do. And I'll tell you what, so I used to fish for, salmon off the pier a lot back when I was, single and young. And all these old guys would be like, oh, wind from the east. It's not going to be good today. Wind from the east. And it would always suck those days. And then other days when it was blowing from the west, you'd catch fish. So like at first I was like, that's not going to make a difference. But I found that it actually did.
Yeah. So again, that has a lot to do with generally the direction of wind is what weather is coming. So like I said in the first one, weather patterns, when they change, they can cause fish to either slow down or increase in their biting. Weather changes will cause a change in fish somehow, often for the better. If you can read it, you can use that to your advantage. So an east or north wind usually comes with a cold front. So if it's coming from the east or from the north, it's bringing in cold Atlantic air or cold tundra air down. And you're bringing in cold front.
So that tundra air.
But if it's coming from the west, it's bringing storms. So often the fish will put on a big feed before the storm comes and the barometric pressure just drops. And it's from the south, it's bringing some warmth. So depending on the species you're going for, that could, break into a spawn or it finishes their spawn and they start moving off into other areas and they can start feeding again because it's warmed up perhaps after a cold front. So yeah, so wind direction can be a good indicator as to what kind of weather is coming. So I say there's some truth to that one.
Yeah, for sure. Like, it's funny how stuff like that, like everyone says it and they sound like, like wives' tales or whatever, but they're actually, some of them are true. So it's interesting to, actually look into the science behind it.
These things are based on the experience of anglers.
For centuries.
Yeah. So like sometimes you can chalk it up to coincidence. But sometimes they didn't understand why it worked, but they have the proof that it did. So,
yeah.
So here's one of our two cryptids we're talking about today.
Okay.
Ooh. So, it is. I'll give you one name because I can't say the other two because you'll know exactly where it's from. So One name is Kempenfelt Kelly, is what this creature is nicknamed.
Is that from Simcoe?
Yes, it's from Lake Simcoe.
Yeah.
So its other names are Beaverton Bessie.
Yeah.
Yay, my hometown.
Andrew's a hillbilly, if you didn't know.
Or the Loch Simcoe Monster.
That doesn't really roll off the tongue. Whoever invented that, you need to get better imagination.
So I'm going to call it Beaverton Bessie just because.
I like that.
That's good.
It sounds like someone that, some frumpy woman that lives in Beaverton.
Oh, you mean half the population? I can say that because I was from there.
I was gonna say, no, if you live in Beaverton, no offense, but go for a walk.
Great town to grow up in and just go fishing because there's nothing else to do. So,
except for invent mythical creatures.
So Beaverton Bessie has been described as being between 20 and 30 feet long, scaly, has multiple dorsal fins, dark color, and a blunt head, similar to the Loch Ness. So the Huron First Nation people, they used to call it I believe it's Igo Pogo.
Igo Pogo?
Yeah. Or something similar. I'm probably butchering that name. I apologize.
I like that better than Beaverton Bessie.
No, Beaverton Bessie's the best.
Okay. I think Beaverton Bessie was Andrew's first girlfriend or something.
So imagine like you're fishing Lake Simcoe and all of a sudden this like 30-foot serpentine monster comes up with like a blunt head.
And this is the noise it would make.
What would you do? Like this is it was described as like a friendly character, but I
would cast my bait directly towards it. Bring it on. I got 50-pound braid on. No, I'm on Simcoe. There's no way I'm using 50-pound braid.
What if you're perch fishing and all of a sudden you're looking down the ice fishing hole and it's like, oh, it goes dark. Is that a school of herring? And then just like a giant eye comes along. You're like, ah. So, anyways, I like that one because I'd never heard of that the whole time I was living on Lake Simcoe. But I should have been keeping my eye out for it.
Was it possibly invented by a bunch of drunk people?
It's been around. There's been sightings for it for like a long time.
So logically, what do you think it could possibly be? Because obviously, like, it's likely not some kind of mythical creature.
What are you talking about? It is a 20 to 30 foot long, scaly, multiple. No.
Probably a lake sturgeon.
I'm thinking, yeah, like sturgeon. Sturgeon can be attributed to a lot of the aquatic cryptids in freshwater.
Yeah, because they're scaly. They can get big.
They can have what looks like spikes along their back because of their scales, right? If they're large, you can actually see like multiple of those scales protruding from the water to make it look like it has multiple dorsal fins. They have a weird looking mouth on them too. So when you see them and their face, if they can have a weird look on their face when you actually see it, and it does not look natural. And
it's some fish that most people have never seen. So like maybe they see it and they don't really, maybe it's dark or like, it's wavy and you can't really identify it because maybe it's just like it goes by quickly or you've never seen one before. I can see why someone would confuse that with some kind of, cryptid.
For sure. And fishermen's tales, stuff like that. Is the size embellished? Sure.
Yeah.
But could there have been, like, I'm sure at some point in history there has been a 10-foot lake sturgeon.
Oh, for
sure. It wouldn't surprise me.
Why not?
There's white sturgeon that have, they've caught them over 13 feet long, and they have been sighted and measured from the air at 20 feet. Yeah. Like, they can get huge.
Now, that being said, we don't have white sturgeon in Lake Ontario, but lake sturgeon can get sizable.
Yeah.
Who's to say there wasn't a giant one over the years?
Exactly. So anyways, that was one of them.
That's
I'm
cool.
going to keep my eye out in Lake Simcoe for something huge, though.
With the invention of live scope, if you're ever just, fishing and all of a sudden you're using your Panoptics and this huge, like, brontosaurus underwater just goes by, you know what it is now. It's not a huge school of perch with a neck.
If you needed more incentive to get Panoptics, now you have it.
Yeah. If you're sponsored by Panoptics, please send us one.
So how about this one? The color red is invisible underwater. Have you heard that before?
I heard that because remember there used to be that fishing line, Cajun red or something, and it was like, red disappears underwater at 3 feet or something like that. I don't believe that it goes invisible. I feel like the color disappears, but it probably just looks like a gray.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
So with that line, they were saying that if you have a solid red object that's painted, like a solid object that is painted red, it will turn to grayscale. It can lose its color, and all the colors will at some point in the depth of the water, but it will lose its color, but it just turns to grayscale, so you'll still see it. Their argument was it was red tinted clear line, and so when the red disappears, it would make the line invisible because it was a translucent looking, like a clear line.
Wouldn't clear line disappear just
Wouldn't
as
it just go gray?
Yeah.
like cloudy gray. So anyways, They don't make that line anymore, probably for a good reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I remember I was listening to a podcast with Angelo Viola and Pete Bowman talking, and Ange was talking about how like you don't see red around very much in the fishing world anymore. Like red used to be like the color, like red and black and red and white. Like think of there's the Len Thompson 5 of Diamonds. What's the next most popular spoon ever?
The Daredevil.
The Daredevil, like red and white.
Yeah.
But like, oh, if red disappears, then white. Like that thing worked. That spoon caught fish.
Yeah.
How many lures hit like jigs and you like a red jig head or like a red jig with jig and pig? Like you'll catch fish on it.
Yeah.
Because even if it goes dark, what do we also know is a great color? Black.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna like shy away from something that's red just because the fish can't see red. Yeah, but they can still see the lure.
For sure. And I just a side point, I was actually looking up why the Len Thompson 5 of Diamonds is such a good color. And they obviously no one knows why, because we don't see like a fish. Like we don't know, like a lot of people will be like, oh, fish don't see certain colors and blah blah blah. It's like that is true, but they still see something, and this particular combination has been proven over decades and decades and decades. Yeah. And I think the thing that it makes it so effective is the contrast, because you got like bright yellow, and even if red disappears, you have just the different.
And the deeper it goes, the darker it gets.
Yeah. So like imagine the contrast on the spoon underwater. Like fish aren't going to see it the exact same way that we see it, but whatever they see when they look at this Len Thompson spoon, they love it.
Yeah.
And it's been proven. Same with other patterns.
That would make sense of the fact that if it goes dark, like think of road signs. They made them like cautionary signs, black lettering on yellow, because it is such a good contrasting color that you can see it easily when you're driving. So if those red diamonds went to black, let's say, to a fish's eyesight on at 6 feet deep or 8 feet deep, and that would be the yellow, like one of the best contrasting color combinations of all time that just is scientifically proven for us as humans driving on the road. So
yeah. And I think too, the last point about this particular spoon, it's so popular for pike, especially because pike are very visual feeders.
Yes.
And here you have a super like high visibility color, even the yellow alone, with the contrasting diamonds, which makes it fantastic for pike. And you talk to anyone who pike fishes, they probably own many of these particular spoons.
And if anyone's out there thinking, why do they just keep bringing up Len Thompson stuff? It's like, it's because we're excited about this giveaway. This is awesome.
Yeah, and the thing is too, like we said, I've spent tons of money on Len Thompsons over the years. Like I have a box of I have a salmon box that is just spoons, and there's probably 25 Len Thompsons in there in different sizes, and then my pike box has tons of Len Thompsons in it. Like we use them all the time. They catch us fish.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to the
regular programming. So have you ever been told when you're fishing, perhaps, I don't know, with a parent figure, and you're talking and they just say, stop talking, the fish can hear you, you're going to spook the fish?
Yeah, who hasn't?
Why do you think they told you that?
Because they wanted you to shut up.
Absolutely. So scientifically, when you look at how sound waves travel, if the sound waves are in air, they have a very hard time transferring down into water and creating a sound wave to then be audible underneath the water. So if you could almost shout and it'd be barely audible underwater.
I've done experiments myself, like fishing,
looking at fish,
trout streams where there's steelhead sitting in shallow water, and like you can literally talk or shout and they won't move. Yeah. If you move your hand suddenly or stomp your foot down, poof, they're gone.
Yeah. So
vibration.
If you stomp your foot, let's say on the bank, that vibration will travel down through the ground into the water. Mm-hmm. Same thing on a boat, like especially on a tin boat. If you drop your pliers, you hear it above the water, but that vibration sends like a shock wave through the water.
It's like a seismic wave.
Yeah. Whoa. So any water sound waves, I believe, travel faster underwater than above. I believe.
Correct us if we're wrong.
But that's the article that I said that they were claiming. But I can totally see that, because when I've been swimming and also underwater, at the cottage or whatnot, and you'll hear like boats coming from like way far away. Like you'll hear like a propeller running underwater, like from a really far distance. But then you come above water, you don't even hear it. So like I could see that happening. But yeah, are you going to scare fish by talking in a boat? No. But if you drop your pliers or your knife, you're like banging around and rustling the tackle boxes, and you wonder why.
That being said, you probably shouldn't be shouting at the water.
Yeah.
Like, you can't hear me, can you?
Well, if fish got spooked by shouting, then what's
Mike
his...
Iaconelli would never catch any fish.
That's exactly where I was going with that. He'd be catching one fish in each spot, and then he'd have to move.
Yeah. And if you don't know who Mike Iaconelli is, he's a very vocal bass angler in the States, a tournament angler, and he's known to shout a few times and hoot and holler.
Yeah, we do too, especially me. And I hook into like a decent bass for once. I'm like, woo! So another question is: early morning the best time for fishing?
I feel like that question's very dependent. It's like, for instance, like if I'm fishing early spring pike, I don't want to fish early in the morning. I want to wait till it's later in the afternoon when the water's had time to warm up a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But other times, if I'm steelhead fishing, sometimes that early morning, like first hour, is the only time you catch fish sometimes.
Yeah.
For me, anyway.
Yeah. So there's actually some good reasoning with that. So as for the early morning, like you're thinking sunrise, sunset are often great times to fish. Reason being is the sunrise causes two changes. Causes changes in temperature and visibility. So depending what you're fishing for, you're going to have benefits for certain times of the day. So the morning sun, when it comes up, it's warming the shallow water very quickly, and it's not penetrating into the deep water to give that much warmth at all. It's also starting to again brighten things up. So now bait fish, they can see they're now rising off the bottom, they're becoming more active, and they're going to be feeding, which is going to cause other fish to come into those areas. So if you're fishing very clear water, that morning sun is going to have a very quick impact on that area. If you're fishing very stained water, the sun has to be at a higher angle to start having those same impacts. So you might get away with fishing, a bit later in the morning and having the same success you would at a clearer lake or another lake that you normally fish. Each water body is going to have its ideal times. Like how many times we'd fish, up at the Cottage River, and it's pretty tannic water in that river. It's dark water.
And we'd get up at the crack of dawn.
We'd be motoring around and be fishing, and we'd catch like a couple rock bass tops.
Yeah.
And then we'd go back out at like 1 o'clock and we start nailing bass.
Yeah. That particular river, it's not worth getting up early. We found anyway over the years. We caught most of our fish in the evening.
Yeah.
The afternoon.
Evening was good.
Yeah.
So again, with the sunset, you're going to have the water starting to lose some of its heat as the sun's going down, but it still has already been warmed up over the course of the day. So now these fish that are looking to get into the colder temperatures, they're going into the shallows because they'll cool down quick as well. So you can get this, again, looking at what species you're going for can be really helpful to figure out what time of day. And again, look at your water quality, look at all the factors, and it might help you determine on, is morning the best time of the day, or can I sleep in?
Yeah.
I like those lakes.
I'll tell you though, the older you get, I always get young. I know we're not that old. We're, early 30s, but when we were young, and I mean late teens, early 20s, it's different when you hit 30. And I know guys are going to be like, I'm 40, I'm 50. You guys are young whippersnappers, but things rapidly change after your late 20s. Getting up early and going to work the next day,
You feel like death.
it kills you. So I really enjoy, though, sometimes like what we'll do is we'll sleep in. Even when we go camping, we'll sleep in a little bit. And sleeping in is like 8, 9 o'clock at the latest. And then we'll fish like all day into the evening. And we have really good success, and we're not bagged,
Yeah.
Because like sometimes when we go fishing, we have to wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning, pick up the boat, drive to the lake to get there at 5 o'clock, and the sun's already coming up, and you're dead. And then you fish all day, and then you get home and you're wrecked for the next day. Or you could sleep in, go later, fish, the afternoon and evening, have a great day, and get home at a decent time and not feel like death the next day. So things change when you get a little older. And if you're older than 30, I feel sorry for you.
All right, so the last fact I have for this episode.
You know what? I'm going to tell you right now.
Oh.
This is interesting.
Good.
I really like this. And like, I've talked to a lot of people about the podcast on our Instagram, and a lot of our podcasts have been very seasonal. Like we're talking about trout fishing, we're talking about early spring pike. But I said, we're really going to try to mix in some interesting ones that anyone can find interesting. Like A lot of people don't steelhead fish, or a lot of people don't bass fish, but everyone is interested in cryptids. And
So
if you're not, then you're a weirdo.
Or you're a weirdo if you are.
Both.
Everyone's weirdos.
Yay.
Love it. So this one here, I'd like you to say the name of this creature.
Oh, I'm the worst at pronouncing this.
It's that word right there.
Well, Andrew writes like a cross-eyed doctor. Is that an A?
Yeah, that's 2 A's in the beginning there.
So it's Sendetha? I don't know.
So
I didn't do good at English at school.
what I could find, it's Gaius and Sendata.
Gaius and Data?
Gaius and Data.
Where'd you get the G from?
Gee, that's the first letter. Is
Oh, okay. I
Gaius
forgot
and
about
Data.
that already. Gaius and Data. It sounds Spanish.
Apparently. So it was, I believe it was from the Algonquin people.
Very Spanish. It sounds Spanish. Come on.
It does. It
Yeah.
does. That's just the way I'm saying it.
Okay.
It's not accurate, but
If you know how to pronounce
Somewhat-
this word, please tell us.
yeah. So this is probably one of Canada's best known cryptids.
Okay.
Well, aquatic, let's say. So this is the Lake Ontario monster, aka Kingsty.
Kingsty?
Kingsty. It is often sighted near Kingston, Ontario.
Oh.
It has also been sighted in the Hamilton Harbor area and also in the Toronto Islands area.
You know who we should ask? We should ask Jeff from Limestone Lures because he lives in Kingston, I think.
Ooh.
Or we should ask Tackle Box Tony because he fishes Hamilton a lot.
All right, keep your eyes out, people.
Yeah.
Let us know.
Let us know
Photo
if you've
evidence will be rewarded with.
seen with a Len Thompson spoon.
That's worth it.
Yeah.
The hours and days of sulking around shorelines in the early morning with a telescopic lens that cost you $20,000. So, I wanted to read a couple stories about Kingsty
Okay.
of their sighting.
Is it story time?
It's story time.
All right. I got a cup of coffee here.
All
And
right.
if you're listening too, unless you're driving, put your feet up.
Put your feet up.
Listen to
Imagine a
Andrew.
crackling fire in front of you. That's
Actually,
Jesse's weird mouth noises.
just to
Disregard that.
A very small thing. We had a new follower just start following us and listen to our podcast, and she was saying that she really enjoyed it, and she's like, you guys have such a chill vibe. She's like, you should do a podcast, record a podcast around a campfire one day. And I was like, I could definitely see that. So just imagine us now at a campfire, and if I knew how to make campfire noises, I would do it. But maybe right now I'm gonna overdub some right now. Hear that? Oh yeah, that's nice.
And then I threw a bunch of cedars on that green cedar branches, and all of a sudden,
Dude, you're gonna make this editing really hard. Okay, go ahead.
okay. So this is in Kingston, Ontario. This happened in the summer of 1882. A long time ago, children. So shocked onlookers reported seeing a bluish-gray serpent with prominent bristles lazing belly up on the lake's surface, soaking up the sun. Seemingly embarrassed to be caught in such a leisurely position, the beast made a noise of dismay and dove back into the lake. You just killed me. Kingsty is so well known, the creature was the subject of a massive hoax in 1934. During the late summer of that year, people reported seeing a strange creature with the head of a dragon and eyes of fire in Cartwright Bay, east of Kingston. There was even an expedition to find the monster, during which participants claimed their boat was jostled by the mysterious creature.
Jostle.
It wasn't until 1979 that 3 people from Kingston claimed responsibility for the prank decades ago. To create the creature, the 3 troublemakers filled a barrel with empty bottles to make it float and attached a head crafted to look like that of a dragon. They attached the monster to an anchor with rope to keep it in one place. Then they attached twine to the rope under the lake's surface, allowing them to bob the creature up and down from a distance. The 1934 sighting may have been a hoax, but so many sightings of a huge serpent in Lake Ontario have been reported over the years that even the most suspicious of skeptics might raise an eyebrow. So, that was a more recent one. There has been one that was from in the past. So, this was in when was that again?
So that one was a hoax.
So the second part of that was a hoax.
So that's interesting to add that a lot of these sightings possibly could be hoaxes.
Could be. So it was already famous before they decided to create the hoax.
So they probably did that because there was the legend of this creature, and they were like, okay, let's do this to scare some people.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Exactly. Well, just like the Loch Ness Monster, that had been circulated as sightings for hundreds of years before they made the hoax.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And those pictures are shown. So same things has happened with our Kingsty.
I've never heard of this. This is pretty interesting.
So another one. This is in 1805. There were 4 fishermen recasting their lines into Lake Ontario near Kingston, Ontario. It was a beautiful day. The sunlight glimmered on the surface of the water as the fishermen talked and laughed. Suddenly, a strange shape resembling an overturned rowboat emerged from the water. Concerned for the safety of the rowboat's passengers, the fishermen immediately began making their way over to the shape. Imagine their surprise when the shape began making its way over to them. The object, they realized, was not a rowboat at all.
Dun, dun, dun.
Instead, the men were greeted by an enormous serpentine creature with huge eyes and a mouth to match. Reflecting on the terrifying experience, they recalled that the creature had to be more than 45 meters long and as wide as a barrel. As one might expect, the fishermen panicked. They frantically rowed back to the shore, fleeing for their lives. The monster skimmed atop the surface of the water close behind. Once the men were safely back on dry land, they said the creature taunted them from the lake.
Taunt.
So that has been that was 1805 when it was cited, way before the hoax, the confirmed hoax that this was cited. And in fact, soon after, in the early accounts of this, it was the Iroquois people and the Algonquin would speak of an entire race of giant sea serpent dragons living in the Great Lakes system. So when these early reports of them were coming out, the Aboriginal people at that time, they would speak of, oh yeah, that's just Gaius and Data, this serpent. They were not shocked by that at all when they were told
They knew
that,
what it was.
Yeah.
That's interesting. In Lake Ontario, how far-fetched would it be for me to tell you that there's, I don't know what the record size white sturgeon, because we don't have the big, lake sturgeon, sorry. We don't have the big white sturgeon or the beluga sturgeon in other places that get massive. But is it so far-fetched to say that a lake sturgeon, there's one in Lake Ontario that's just a freak, and it's literally 15 feet long and thick. How far-fetched would it be if that thing just decided for some reason to swim up to the surface and literally jump out of the water and land on a boat and break it in half? Like if that thing jumped up and fell on a tinner or like a wooden, like a sailboat or something, it would do damage. And that, if you were maybe had a few too many cocktails that night, you just saw like a legit sea monster jump out of the water and jump on your ship. So like it's possible. We don't know. And that's the cool thing about cryptids is you never know.
So we'll leave it up to you. You decide, dear listeners. So here we have some questions as well that Jesse has been able to compile from some of our...
So we always ask on a poll on our Instagram. So if you are listening to this podcast and perhaps don't follow us on Instagram, that is the place to get in contact with us. We're on there all the time. We post a lot of stories, and that's where we ask questions for our giveaways and also our Q&A. But before we do our Q&A, I thought we could just talk about Len Thompson just again for 1 sec, because I want to tell you one spoon. You may have had a Len Thompson or fished one, but one Len Thompson that I just recently in the last 2 years got hooked on. Yeah,
hooked on.
Literally, is the Dimpled series. Now, if you look at this, Andrew, compared to the regular Len Thompson, it is a bit slimmer.
Yeah.
And it's dimpled, obviously. It's called the Dimpled series.
It's dimpled in the opposite way, though.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times you have like dimples like a golf ball where it's indented in the face of it. This is actually protruding onto the face.
Yeah, like
of
there's
it.
like bumps coming out of it. And the
It's
cool
very
thing about
flat.
these...
It won't get in the way of that Siwash hook either, because it's nice and like not super cupped.
Exactly. And here's a smaller size, the one behind you. Look how thick that is. You can take it out.
That's dense.
These Dimpled series, they're a little thicker than the average size smooth for that size. So that little... We have this...
loud.
Yeah.
I don't know what that word. That's French. I don't know how to read it.
But anyway, yeah, it says there's a sticker around the package that says heavy. It's like a heavy spoon. This one is pretty thick. So you're casting this smaller spoon. Like this one is pretty small. I don't know the exact size of it, but it's, I'd say like 1.25 inches, maybe an inch and a half. And it's heavy. You can literally cast these. And the reason I picked up one of these at the first is I got this size on the back says Len Thompson number 13 dimpled is for salmon. They come with the Siwash hooks. These things cast a mile. They cast a mile and they have a slightly different action, but it's very erratic and crazy. And I've done really well for salmon on them. And this year I'm trying to get back to like basics this year, just like fishing some simple stuff that just produces. And I think we're going to have a day where me and Andrew just go out and just fish spoons. Yeah. And that's going to be one of mine, the dimpled one, because it casts a mile and has a really crazy erratic action. I like light fluttering spoons sometimes, but a lot of times I just want to whip a spoon as far as it goes. Like if you're at the river mouth and you're trying to catch steelhead or salmon and you just want to whip a spoon. So definitely check out the dimple series. This color here, I don't know exactly what it's called, but it's called like paired or something. It's crazy. It's like really bright colors, which is why I got it for salmon. But they have all kinds of colors, and they've done really well for us. And if you do fish for salmon, I'm pretty sure they offer these with the single Siwash hook, which we personally like. I also like treble hooks too, but we do like the Siwash hooks because it does a lot less damage to a fish if you're going to release it.
And you get them hooked on that, and we have far fewer thrown hooks.
Yeah, and even fish that we keep, I don't care about the damaging the fish because I'm going to keep the fish, but I find when you hook a fish on a Siwash, it rarely gets off.
Yeah.
If you hook a fish on a treble hook, sometimes they can shake it pretty easy. So I thought I'd just mention that if you've never tried the dimpled series, definitely check it out. And this one I actually thought Andrew would like. It's just the regular Len Thompson. Look how small this is.
Oh, it's so cute.
It's literally, I think it's like 1 inch long. I got that for brook trout.
That's perfect.
Yeah. So they make sizes. We're going to talk about this another time on our Instagram, but I'm going to show like all the different sizes of spoons because like they make them, I think that small all the way up to big.
Yeah, I got a big musky one that I can't wait to use.
So there's literally a spoon size for you for whatever you fish for. So oh yeah, so fantastic. The questions.
Yes. Yeah.
So here's some of the questions that we got from Instagram, and a lot of them are about Len Thompson, so I thought we could do those ones today, and then we'll do some of the other ones another day. So Nathaniel Penner, he asked this. Why don't you go? What is your favorite spoon color? If you only had to pick one spoon, that's a hard one. Why don't you pick 3?
Okay. So if I was fishing salmon, I would say like one of them. Again, fishing salmon is often something I do with spoons.
Like
so
shore
I would
casting.
say, a blue glow in the dark. Yep. Like half glow, half blue, or blue silver.
Yep.
That's probably one of my favorites color combinations.
I've done good on blue. Yeah.
Yeah. Another one would be 5 of diamonds is on that list.
Yeah.
I love it. And the third one is, I talked about it before, is this for Len Thompson spoons?
Any spoon.
The third one would be Williams Wobbler. That's just something I've grown up fishing.
Is just like
the
hammered
silver. Yeah, no, full silver, hammered finish.
Yeah.
That is, I've fished with that my whole life, and I've always had success with that one too.
Yeah.
So those would be like the 3 that I would do. But if I could just have one color only, I would have to say it would. It's hard to beat the 5 of diamonds, just because, again, not to be like, oh, it's because it's Len Thompson. It's because I have a lot of confidence in that color. I have caught some really good fish on it, and I would be happy casting the smallest size for trout, and I'd be happy casting the biggest size of that for muskie and anything in between.
Yeah. And again, it's a proven color. It's not like, you're just saying, oh, it's just because, I like the color. It works.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, Len Thompson makes this color. It's their platinum series. So a lot of the Len Thompsons, because they're made of brass, the back is brass colored or gold color. Mm-hmm. They have the platinum series. The back is nickel color, so it's silver. They have a fire tiger color. I've done good on that. Remember last year I caught a really good smallmouth on that.
Yeah.
We were pike fishing, and I was chucking big fluorocarbon leader, big bait caster, and I hooked this fish. And I'm like, yeah, it's a good one. Thought it was a big pike. It comes in. It was a huge, chunky smallmouth. I was like, oh man, and it was on that fire tiger. Yeah. I think just that bright color,
which we threw back right away without taking photos of because it was out of season.
I know. It was like literally early April. We're pike fishing, and man, always when you catch the biggest smallmouth, when you can't even take a picture of them. Yeah. Second, I'd say a glow spoon for sure.
Yep.
Honestly, I'm not super picky with my glow spoons because in my thought, I don't think it really matters. Like some guys swear that, oh, it has to be this color with these dots on it or these stripes. I don't think it matters. I'm honestly, these Newland Thompsons, the super glows, I like dots. I don't know if it makes a difference. These ones look pretty good with some orange dots. That's a confidence bait for me. I've also done well with the blues. You know, I bought a whole bunch of like blues. You got the greens, the oranges. Like, I've caught fish on all of them. I don't know if it makes a difference.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I just said 3, but hey, that's enough. Anyway, next question. Andrew, why don't you answer this? Your favorite childhood fishing story. We all have that one fishing story as kids. We have a lot of stories.
Yeah. So I have to say one of my first ones would be we were camping as a family in Algonquin Park, and I would always wake up like at the first loon call. Like it'd be like just barely like sunrise, fog is on the lake, like every single morning, and I'm up, I'm awake, my parents are trying to sleep in, and I go down, I grab I was fishing actually a Williams wobbler. As it happens to turn out, it's another spoon. But
you see, I like blur out that. Beep.
So I was fishing a Williams wobbler, and I was standing on I waded out to this little like rock outcropping off of our campsite, and I started casting, and I hooked this. It was a 1/4 pound rock bass, like just this stupid rock bass, and he gets the whole treble in his mouth on like this fair size Williams.
Of course.
So I'm trying to get these like 3 hooks out, and his face is like torn. I'm like, like it's a rock bass though. I'm not keeping this thing. It's tiny. So I release it. I'm like, it'll survive. And I keep casting, and then I hook another fish. I bring it in. It's the same stupid rock bass. And now the treble hook went through its eye. So I hook it. I'm like, you stupid fish. And I put it back, and I move to the other side of this rock outcropping, and I start casting. And I hook a fish, and I bring it in. And I went right through his nostril, and it's the same rock bass.
And a death
I
wish.
released it, and I went back to the main campsite. I walked about 50 yards down, and then walked out another rock outcropping to like this little island, cast out, and I'm fishing for like another half hour. And I hook another fish, and it's the stupid rock bass again. I don't know why it's moving so far. You. So I caught the same fish, and I felt so bad for the thing. And I stopped fishing that morning because I couldn't not keep catching this one poor rock bass, and I felt bad for all the damage I'd already done to it. So that was one of my earliest, but like my first like odd, funny fishing story I ever had as a kid was that one.
I remember at your cottage catching the same rock bass 2 or 3 times in a row.
Yeah.
They're fish. They're pretty dumb.
Yeah.
They're probably one of the dumber fish.
I've never had one be such a glutton for punishment, though.
That's a funny story. I'll tell you one of my favorite stories growing up. So we used to fish in the Kawarthas. My family would go camping up on one of the Kawartha lakes, and I had never caught a really big bass at this time. I was pretty young. I was like 13. Like I'd caught bass, but like not big ones. And I was like really into fishing. Like I loved fishing, and we went up, and my brother, who doesn't really fish, we were fishing off the dock just for sunfish, and he ended up pulling like a 2-pound bass out from under the dock. And at the time, like a 2-pound bass is a good sized fish if you're, 12 or 13 years old. And I was so mad. I was like, this guy doesn't even fish, and he's like 8 years old, and he pulls this bass out from underneath the dock. And I was all mad, and I was sulking, I was like, a young guy. And my dad's like, don't worry, like, keep going. You'll catch a big one eventually. And I decided to go night fishing that night.
I know exactly where this story is going.
So
it's a good one.
I went night fishing, and I had dew worms on a circle hook. And I had remember those worm blowers? You blow a little air into it.
I still have
a little
one.
Split shot. And I waded almost up to my neck in the swimming area at this provincial park. And I put a dew worm on, and I cast it out past the boys, and I just let it sink. And I was just reeling in, and all of a sudden, I'm trying to hold the rod above the water because I wasn't sure at that age if my reel could get wet. I wasn't sure. And all of a sudden my line just tightens, and I was like, okay. So I start reeling it in because there's a circle hook, and I just feel like just weight. And I'm like, I thought I snagged something like a turtle because I had caught snapping turtles at the time. I thought I hooked a snapping turtle, and all of a sudden it starts like dogging, and I'm like, okay. And it starts pulling, and it went below. I'm like right at the the rope with the floating buoys. I'm right at there, and it starts going underneath between my feet, and my line goes right along the side of my leg, and I'm like, oh, like it's pitch dark. I can't see anything. And I was like, what the heck did I hook? Like, it's a fish because it's swimming around. I ended up pulling it. Heaven forbid, the hook did not come out. I pull it up, and it came up in the moonlight, and it was a bass. It was a big largemouth, biggest one I've ever caught, still to date. And it came up and opened its mouth and shook its head almost like in slow motion. And it was the biggest bass I've ever seen. It was 6.4 pounds, and it was huge largemouth. And I grabbed it like fisherman's death grip, like on the lip, and I literally dragged it to shore. And my dad was like, holy crap, like that's a huge bass. Like, he's like, you don't understand. Like, that's a big one. Like, that's huge. And there was these guys down there fishing off the dock, and they came over and they were like, holy crap, look at the size of that bass. Like, at the time I didn't, I wasn't super good with like fish handling at the time, because I was like 12 or 13. But we ended up getting a picture of it. Very, not the best picture ever. It was like one of those like little, wind up cameras. Yeah. But it was it was a huge bass. It was 6.4 pounds, and if you looked in its mouth, it had
a largemouth.
It had a bullhead, a catfish, and you could feel in its gut. It had this huge. It was like a 7 or 8 inch bullhead just down its gullet. It was a huge bass, and like I was just shaking because it was so big. I was like lifting. I was like, the biggest bass I've ever seen. I never caught a bass bigger than that since then, largemouth, and I just felt so like happy and vindicated at that part. I was so happy, but like that is still the biggest bass that I've ever caught in Ontario. So that
awesome.
That was a good story for me. Like, it brings back a lot of good memories, like camping with our family and being with my dad. And
yeah. I remember when Jesse caught that. I remember getting the letter.
We used to write letters to each other because it was before like social media or cell phones.
We'd send each other pictures, and then once we got computers, they weren't great, but we had computers, so we'd burn discs and send the discs to each other with like fishing photos from that year. And
so Andrew sends me a picture of a rock bass with 17 holes in its head, and I sent him a picture of a 6-pound bass. Anyway, that was a good one. Another question. Are you having guests on yet? Waders Angling Outdoors. LOL. So I don't know if that's supposed to be like, are you having guests on yet because you guys are boring? Or are you having guests on yet? Yeah.
Or are you having guests on yet? Because I'd like to be one. LOL.
Yeah. We are having guests. Here's the thing. Getting guests onto our show, because I pride ourselves on having actually really good audio on this podcast. Mm-hmm. Like, not amazing.
We're still improving on it.
We're improving on it.
We didn't come into this halfway. Like, Jesse and I, when we started this podcast, we talked about it, and we're like, okay, we want to do the podcast. We need to get legit equipment.
I want it to sound good. So like, when you have guests on and it's over Zoom or over the internet, usually the podcast is not the best. It doesn't sound as good. So we're trying to work on that by doing some guests that live close by that can actually come to our studio, or going to be doing some mobile podcasts in the future. So yes, we actually do have some guests coming up before the end of summer. We will have about 3 or 4 guests. Hopefully, every 4 to 6 weeks we'll have a guest, but at the same time, a lot of people that we'd want to get on as guests, they're busy or they live far away. Yeah. So,
and again, we want to be able to have a guest on when there's a reason for it. Like, to have someone who is knowledgeable at a certain topic that perhaps we aren't as knowledgeable on. That's the kind of thing where, we'd love to have them on. We can kind of pick their brain for you, and we get to learn stuff. You're learning what we're learning at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. Here's the last question. Commonly Carpy, who's actually one of our guests coming up.
Yep.
That's a spoiler. He asks, biggest carp.
I think
we don't weigh our carp. I don't want to sound like a carp reverse snob, but I've never been inclined to weigh carp. I don't really. It doesn't.
We have weighed them in the past.
Have we?
Yeah. We'd weigh them in the net. We'd have to like minus the weight of the net and stuff. And
not regularly though.
We didn't.
Yeah. I don't catch a carp and immediately want to weigh it. To me, like I'm not like Andrew, commonly Carpy Andrew. He's trying to catch big fish, and he's trying to beat his personal best. So like he's going to weigh his fish. Like I personally don't care. And I have a lot of people ask me whenever we post a carp picture, like, oh, how much did it weigh? I'm like, I don't know. Same with salmon. We don't weigh salmon.
We're not against it, but it's just we're mainly out there to have fun.
Yeah.
It's a great way to start fishing.
Now, if I caught a giant one and if I had a scale handy, sure, 100%. I'd weigh it. But from looking at other people's photos that legitimately weigh their fish so you can trust the weight, we've definitely both caught fish in the low 30s, like 30-ish at least. We've caught some giants over the years, but generally where we fish, we're not catching giants. We're catching fish that are averagely, I'd say 15 to 25 pounds.
Yeah.
And like 25 pounds is a good fish.
For sure.
Once you hit that 30-pound mark, like I've been fishing with commonly Carpy when he caught one that was like 31 pounds, and you looked at that fish, it was a giant fish.
Yeah.
And he's caught fish much larger than that as well. But again, we weigh bass sometimes. Yeah. We don't really weigh a lot of fish
because we also don't for a long time we didn't have a scale that, like, we'd have a bass scale, but it's not going to do for carp. Because you're going to catch something, like bass scale goes up to 20 pounds.
Yeah.
We caught lots of carp over 20 pounds. So there's no point for us to bring it because it's not impressive to weigh something that is less than 20 pounds.
Yeah. And again, some people, that's their deal. They like to keep track of how much the weight of the fish. Generally speaking, we want to get the fish back in the water as fast as possible without having to weigh it.
Yeah. And carp are very hardy. So we have some photos with it, whatnot. We'll talk about some stuff. But we also, are making sure that we're doing proper fish care, and then we'll get it back in the water.
I think,
like I said too, we like carp fishing because it's something we can do after work, and it's just like it's a great, nice night out. Like just
I'd be happy to catch a bunch of 15-pounders.
Yeah.
I'm not going there for the trophy fish.
Yeah.
Also, not a ton of time to target.
It's a social fishing outing for us.
Because like if we wanted to target giant carp, we could do that, but it takes a lot of time, which we don't have. But
and prep on a certain spot too.
Oh yeah, like a lot of time. It's involved, and these guys that actually catch,
it's not just prep like at your house of like, oh, I need to tie rigs. Like, no, you need to prep the area you are fishing for weeks in advance.
Yeah, and again, we're going to talk about that in the upcoming episode with Commonly Carp, because he's obsessed with carp fishing and he has a lot of tips. So that is the questions that we're going to do today. Again, we'd like to thank Len Thompson. That's amazing.
That is so cool. When Jesse told me, he's like, we got Len Thompson, I freaked out. That was so cool to hear.
And it was awesome because, like, again, we like to work with companies that, we've bought and used their stuff for a long time. Like, I've had Len Thompson's for years, over 20 years, and I'm not even that old.
And we also like to work with local companies as well. Like, we love the small bait manufacturers. Like, they're fantastic. We have just as much love for you guys too.
For sure.
Len Thompson, we really appreciate their support on this episode. And because of they're a larger company, they've been able to offer, a really good value for the giveaway. So that's why another reason why we're so excited is because we get to pass that on to someone who we're going to choose, or not we're going to choose, but we have a spin the wheel of names.
And we would just like to say as well, at this point in our podcast career, you could say, we're not making any money doing this. This is all for fun and to, keep you guys getting some prizes going.
See, we could ask for sponsors and then just keep all this stuff, but Jesse's told me no. So
we
give it away.
But if you can do us a favor, if you haven't given us a review on this podcast, do that. But if you can do us a huge favor, message Len Thompson on their Instagram and say that you heard the podcast and you have their lures, you really like doing it. Mention that you heard about them on our podcast. That would be huge, and they're gonna like it too. Imagine if you owned a company and someone messaged you and said, hey, I have some of your stuff, it's amazing. Feel good.
Especially too, how much more meaningful, or how as well meaningful that would be to some of these smaller guys where they're doing this out of their homes. And if you hear about it and you use their stuff, or you're gonna try something, let them know, hey, I heard about you on the podcast, on the Average Ontario Anglers podcast. It's so exciting that you did that. I know the guy who won, or I use this stuff.
Yeah.
That makes their day to get stuff like that. Like, good feedback can be hard. You don't often hear that. People are more likely to write a negative review than a good one oftentimes. And let's make that change.
For sure.
That's very like, yay, people, let's change.
So if you were on our Instagram the last few days, we put up our entry for the Len Thompson. At this point, you can only enter these giveaways on our Instagram account, so definitely follow us. It's Average Ontario Anglers on Instagram, and we got a lot of
that's a lot.
We got a lot of entries, and what I said is, if you repost the story as well, so more people see it, you get 2 entries. So a lot of people actually got 2 entries.
Nice.
So I just would like to add this, and I forgot to add this the last few podcasts. If you won the last 2 or 3 podcasts, the giveaway, and you win now, we're gonna have a 3 months you can't win again period. So I would hate someone that won last week to win this week as well. So we're going to do a 3-month period. So if you entered and you won recently, sorry, but I want to be fair to everyone. So anyway, we actually got a lot of entries and I'm really happy.
Yeah. That's the most entries so far.
It's a great giveaway. And again, thank Len Thompson. And when I was dealing with the young lady at Len Thompson, super nice. They're just, it's a nice family.
Yeah.
Anyway. All right. So here's the giveaway. I'm going to press the spinner.
And all the names are in Comic Sans, so you know it's serious.
Yeah. And the winner is Mike Gadd.
Congratulations, Mike Gadd.
Mike Gadd, you're the winner of the Len Thompson prize pack. You can see right there if you're watching us on YouTube, Mike Gadd. We got so many entries. I was really happy, and I don't know everyone that entered, so I'll definitely send you a message, Mike. We'll get in contact with you as well. We don't know exactly what the prize is. It's actually going to be a few of our favorites. They asked us what our favorites were, and then they're going to add some other stuff on top of that. So that's amazing. But I really like this podcast. That was a good podcast. I'd say it's one of my favorite ones we've done so far.
Nice.
And if you agree, message me on Instagram and tell me if you like this podcast. We love hearing the feedback.
For sure. Yeah. And you let us know if we're doing something good or bad.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we liked it, but no one else did, Jesse, so now we can't do another one.
Yeah. Well, my dad tells me every episode is good, but, you know, it's biased.
My mom told me I was cute growing up. It doesn't mean anything.
Anyway, that was a good podcast, Andrew. And you know what? I was actually telling people about this one because I knew it was going to be a good one, so good job, Andrew.
Thank you. So thanks again for all your listeners and or viewers on YouTube. Always check us out. Follow us on Instagram at Average Ontario Anglers. On YouTube, same name. And on TikTok, we also have some content there as well, if that's what you're into. But thanks a lot for all your support. And tight lines, everyone.